Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. Really fun show on tap. An amazing memory of a Georgia-Auburn game in the past. That's going to come up today. Terrence Edwards is here. We'll talk to him today. That's always good stuff. Update on key Georgia injury that's important. And off the top of the program, hey, one of the bigger storylines for Saturday's game is navigating and dealing with a very hostile Auburn crowd. Well, a former Georgia star who knows what it's like to be in tough environments, including Jordan-Hare Stadium, gave us a recipe for this week for how Georgia can do it. We're going to start with that here today and discuss what Kirby Smart himself has had to say about that, too. So we're going to cover all of that, getting you ready for the Deep South's oldest rivalry and the renewal of which coming up again on Saturday. Glad you're here for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at georgiadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
As college football fans, we make a big deal about a lot of things, and some of the things we make a big deal about really are that big of a deal. Some of the things that we make a big deal about are probably overblown, at least a little bit, when it comes to the spirit of we just like having something to talk about, so therefore we find something to discuss. Maybe an example of that going into Saturday's game against Auburn about what it feels like to play in the hostile environment that is Jordan-Hare Stadium. Now, I can tell you that having been to everywhere that Georgia's been, so I haven't been to Kyle Field in College Station, haven't been to the Swamp, having been everywhere that Georgia goes, I'd probably put what Jordan-Hare Stadium typically is, especially for a night-type game that it's going to be on Saturday, I'd probably put that at or near the top of the road environments in the SEC, challenging for a team like Georgia. Toughest road crowd I've probably seen was that Auburn game in 2017. I would say all of that's real. If you dig deep, though, to try to find actual empirical data, statistical evidence that supports this, admittedly, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I mean, frankly, as of late, with Auburn not being very good, well, they're also losing more games at home than they used to. A couple of years ago, they lost New Mexico State, for instance. You know, for some fans, it's going to be a little bit hard to believe, oh my gosh, Jordan-Hare Stadium is a house of horrors and this scary place if they're losing to New Mexico State. And I do get that. I do get that. Auburn in the Hugh Freeze era has lost a little bit more at home than we're used to seeing them lose. But there is also buried within that some statistical evidence, some anecdotal evidence that, yeah, you know what? Jordan-Hare Stadium really can be a really tough place to play. For instance, the last time Georgia went there, 2023, Georgia's a pretty big favorite. That game was far closer than it was supposed to be. Needed a kind of a heroic performance from Brock Bowers in the second half of the game just to win it. So that's an example of, okay, you went there and you won, but it was closer than it was supposed to be. Hard to play at Auburn. Maybe even a better example of that was same year, into the season, Alabama goes there as a huge favorite over Auburn. And frankly, Alabama got out of Jordan-Hare Stadium probably a little lucky to win. There have been a lot of these between Alabama and Auburn. You know, Auburn's had a lot more success against Alabama than Georgia has had, and most of that for Auburn has come at Jordan-Hare Stadium, somehow feeding off the big crowd and having some chance to at least give itself a chance to win. Auburn seems to do a lot of that when playing Alabama at home. Last year, there was also the example of pretty good Texas A&M team coming in, 6.5-point favorite that day. Auburn won the game outright. So if you're looking for a team similar spread what you face on Saturday, with Auburn having a chance to play better than expectations, a year ago against Texas A&M, that's what Auburn did, feeding off the crowd, one of the reasons why, and obviously Georgia and its fans for this particular weekend, they want to try to do everything they can to avoid that. So with that in mind, I asked a guy who played in this environment, and I always like to lean on guys who have personal firsthand experience with the sort of things we discuss on the show about what it feels like and what it's like, because honestly, the perspective they're able to share is just different than the one that I'd be able to share, because I have an intuition of what some of this stuff is like, but these guys have actual testimony. So Davin Bellamy played, Neyland Stadium, Jordan-Hare Stadium, tough road environments. And I said, as a guy, and Davin, of course, joins us on the show yesterday, as he does each week. And I said, as a guy who has played in hostile road environments in the SEC for Georgia, like what the Dogs are going to experience at Jordan-Hare Stadium on Saturday, what do you do to survive and maybe even thrive in this environment? How do you neutralize that crowd, give yourself the best chance to win? And I thought Davin gave a pretty thorough and interesting answer, and I want to break it down here, starting with the simple point that Davin says is crucial when it comes to winning a game like this and getting that crowd out of the game.
Well, it's a tough place to play, man. Playing at Auburn, I was one of the loudest. That was the loudest game I've ever, been a part of. And, what you want to do, just comparing it to going into, Tennessee and beating them 46-zip and then going into Auburn, well, you got to get the crowd out of it, very early. And we was able to do that my senior year against, Tennessee, playing in another hostile environment. Against Auburn, we let, the crowd get into it. And of course, just like this year, Georgia is coming in as the higher ranked team. So that crowd is going to be rocking. It's going to be their Super Bowl.
So really good stuff from Davin Bellamy. And listen, I can't make myself be any smarter than I am. I'm as smart as God made me. But I do try to be honest. So that's one thing I do feel like I have control over, and so I try to be honest. And I want to be honest about what Davin says there about, hey, get off to a fast start. That takes the crowd out of the game. Here's my honest response to that. Intuitively, that seems really true, doesn't it? Seems really, really true. And when you think about, like, say, last year at Texas, in October, which arguably may have been the best performance for Georgia all season long and one of the better performances from Georgia in any game in recent years. Georgia gets off to a 23-0 lead. They're winning 23-0, going to halftime, 23-0, right? That clearly setting the tone early in the game did some to neutralize that crowd, and it set the tone that would allow Georgia to win the game. We all lived through that. Some of us were there. Getting off to the fast start really seemed to make the difference. And conversely, why did Georgia lose to Alabama last September? Well, you can say, well, it was the Ryan Williams heroic catch, or it was the late interception of the ball thrown towards Colby Young. But the real truth is the reason why Georgia lost that game is because it dug itself such a big hole in the first quarter. And had to spend the rest of the game getting out of that hole and ultimately just ran out of time. That the slow start against Alabama probably lost them the game. The fast start against Texas seemingly won them the game. And so therefore what Davin says must be 100% true, because it certainly feels true, right? But this is where the evidence, once again, doesn't exactly 100% back that point up. For instance, in the game we've referenced now a couple of times, the big 2017 game when Georgia went and faced the hard crowd there and really got beaten up pretty good. You don't see Georgia get manhandled very much, but in 2017, let's be honest, Georgia kind of did. But a lot of people don't remember this. First drive of the game, Georgia marched down the field and scored like it was its job. 7-0, just as quick as you could blink. So in that particular case, if we're being completely honest, while it seems like a fast start's always a great idea, the fast start didn't exactly help Georgia in 2017, if we're being honest. And similar situation for Georgia last year at Ole Miss. That's another game on the road where hostile crowd, Georgia kind of got handled in the way we don't normally see them. Georgia was also up 7-0 in that game too. That it's just one of those things where intuitively it feels true that the fast start is just crucial for taking the home crowd out of the game. And most of the time it probably is, but there are examples where it seems like you get off to a fast start and it still doesn't quite pay off the way that you want it to. Even against Auburn, we have an example of that for Georgia. But nonetheless, it just spiritually feels true, emotionally it feels true, that if you want to get the crowd out of the game, you got a real chance to do that by just jumping on them quick. And I thought that Davin laid a couple of really good points out about one on offense, one on defense for exactly how that happens. I think this is really interesting. Let me start on the offensive side. Davin's a defensive guy, but thinking about offense, and I like it when points are simple. This is a pretty simple point. Here is the simple thing that Davin says George can do offensively to get off to the fast start and to keep this Auburn crowd from becoming the factor that we obviously fear that it might. Davin, once again, from yesterday.
Last week, especially on the offensive side of the ball, I think the offense did a great job on first down of making it 2nd and 5s, second and 4. Then you gotta, take your, hat off the gunner. He does a great job and not creating negative plays for the offense. So even when he's scrambling and he's extending those drives, or he's getting the 3-4 yard, scrambles on, second down, he's making it 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4. When you go into Auburn and it started rocking, and now, the offense going on a silent count, and the defense ends up trying to pin their ears back, and that crowd start, swag surfing. You put a lot of stress on your tackles, and you put a lot of stress on your passing game. So I think we should take the same recipe that we did last week and just winning first downs and staying in third and managers. I think if we could do that, we can out physical them.
Listen, I just think that's a really simple, really easy to understand point. I really do. That if you're successful on first down, if you're calling your best plays, if you're executing at your highest level on first down, all of a sudden you don't have that thing. And y'all know, listen, I travel to these games, I'm covering them for work, but I'm also a Georgia fan. I want Georgia to win. And it just seems like it never fails. That when you're on the road in the SEC, every team's got their third down music, and it's this pulsating, rhythmic, repetitive bass where it's just doom, 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 doom. And the PA announcer's screaming, crowd's getting loud. And it just feels like every 3 seconds you're already back to third down again. And the whole crowd's getting revved up. And listen, I'm always amazed that anybody can get off the line of scrimmage and block and keep the pass rusher away, that these guys can hear and communicate. It's honestly amazing that any of these teams can ever do this, just given how hostile these road environments have become in the SEC. And when you're playing on the road, it feels like your team is in third down like every 3 seconds. And Davin says, well, if you don't want that feeling, then do something on first down to make it be more like 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, and therefore the opposing pass rush is not pinning its ears back. And I think it's actually a really good point, that if you're really looking for Georgia to get off to the fast start, early game success is really predicated on early down success. I think that's actually a really simple, easy to understand point from Davin that's absolutely correct. He also, looking at his side of the ball, the defense, also made another point here too about how if you really want the crowd to not be a factor, it's what Georgia does defensively that probably matters more than anything else. One more from Davin Bellamy on this topic.
And on the defensive side of the ball, same what we did last week, start fast. Start fast, because defense win championships, but offense sell tickets. So that means that the people, the fans, are at the game, to watch the offense. So if the offense, start to get rolling and start hitting those deep plays downfield, and Georgia is not winning those 50-50 balls that we struggle with this year, and the crowd get behind it. Now the crowd's behind the defense. You could get a little, recipe, for disaster. So just taking the crowd out of there early, Georgia on offense, winning first down, staying physical, and Hugh Freeze is going to take some shots. We got to win those 50-50 battles downfield.
This is just such a good, simple, easy to understand point that the crowd comes to cheer the offense, and the fans will get restless if the offense isn't giving them reason to cheer. And specifically, it's those, as he calls them, 50-50 balls. Now, listen, that's some of what Tennessee had success with against Georgia in the other road game that Georgia's played this season. If you can limit some of that, you probably do limit the crowd. And keep in mind that while Georgia had an early deficit against Tennessee, it was at least keeping some pace offensively. It had a scoring drive on its first possession, which set the tone that Georgia wasn't going to get run out of the stadium. It was going to remain competitive all day, and it allowed itself to make just enough plays to eventually get that win in overtime. I think everything that Davin is saying makes total sense. It's also fair to point out this is a little bit of a touchy subject for Kirby Smart about when Georgia does and doesn't get off to fast starts. I don't think Smart particularly likes this narrative, even if it is important to be at your best at the beginning of games. And if we're being honest, that's not something that Georgia has always consistently done. Like even again this week, when facing questions about it, Smart pushed back on the notion that that this is maybe totally in Georgia's control. Judge for yourself. Kirby a little testy on the idea of, well, of course they want to get off to fast starts. This is Kirby.
Do we want to start fast? Yes. What made us start fast? I can't give. We didn't take a pill. We didn't inject anything. We didn't put different pregame meal. We go out to execute every game. Sometimes the opponent makes that really hard. Sometimes we make it hard because we bust. But that's the objective every game. How do we start fast? What do we do to start fast? And how can we execute better than the other team? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about.
If I could humbly suggest, if you go back to Saturday's post-game press conference, Smart also focused in on their catchphrase for this year, fire, passion, and energy, as a way of explaining the fast start against Kentucky, that if Georgia has, as they call it, FPE to begin the game, then they'll get off to a fast start, and maybe if they don't have it, they won't. Once again, humbly and in due deference, would gently push back about the notion that your fast start is based on the motivation of your players. Kirby has a little bit of a habit sometimes of pretending that coaching strategy doesn't exist, that his sole role as a coach is to motivate the players to be at their best, and if they're properly motivated, then everything's going to be fine. But for the most part, we understand that fast starts offense usually come because of a really smart play script, and preventing a fast start from the opposing offense means that defensively you're ready for what the offense wants to throw at you, that it's not about the fire, passion, and energy of the players. It's about the cognitive preparation of the game plan. We would, I think, guess about that. But nonetheless, it's a touchy subject for Georgia because obviously the one thing we can't dispute is, of course, you want to get off to a fast start. You don't necessarily always do that. We are hopeful that they can do that on Saturday. Let me give you, though, one final point on this about why, going back to what Davin Bellamy said a moment ago, about the notion that you really could take the Auburn crowd out of this game from the very beginning, why that might be more possible than maybe you even realize. Every week there's a SEC coaches teleconference where all the coaches are there together. There's, I guess they dial in, reporters ask questions. On the Wednesday, which was yesterday, coaches teleconference for Hugh Freeze, he was asked directly about his job status and does he feel pressure to win so he didn't get fired. Was asked about that yesterday. We played you the clip earlier this week of Freeze, very contrite in owning his role in the lack of success that Auburn had at Texas A&M 2 weeks ago in the most recent game the Tigers played. My point in saying all of this is to simply point out that there's a lot of angst on the plains, as they like to call it. There is a lot of, are we sure this team's any good? Are we sure that we're not about to have to go back and do another coaching search again? Because, Hugh Freeze has been the butt of jokes. The recruiting hasn't been very good. They're just not winning enough. They've lost, a couple of SEC games already this year. So y'all been around the SEC a long time. Some of you have. You know how this goes. Fan bases have a tendency to be big believers at the beginning of a game because why not? Why couldn't it be us? You get around the tailgate, you're around other fans, everybody gets a little bit optimistic, so you go marching towards the stadium feeling like today's going to be our day. But the moment something happens in the game that calls that into question, all of the previous frustration and doubt you've been expressing when Auburn lost at Oklahoma and lost to Texas A&M, all of a sudden that comes rushing back. So in other words, Davin says, hey, if you get off to a fast start, you can take this crowd out of the game. Well, in some cases, that turns out not to be true. Wasn't true in 2017, wasn't true for Ole Miss last year. But in this particular case, that may be more true than ever because while the support Auburn's going to get on Saturday is going to be very wide and very loud, it may be pretty thin because deep down, these folks know they're not very good. And so if their team doesn't get off to a good start to support that the Auburn fans are giving them, then maybe Georgia can puncture this, and maybe Georgia can quiet it down, and maybe Georgia can have a little, try to speak English, a little easier time on the road than sometimes you would suggest they might. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. Glad you're with us, no matter how you get to us. Live video, 10 a.m., on demand after that. Radio, Athens Sports Radio 96 The Ref, podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really, really happy to have you as a part of our program today. Always thrilled about that, and very thankful to have our friends at Merriweather and Tharp as a part of that, too. Now, listen. we're speaking to folks all across the great state of Georgia, and really around the world. But across our state, it's nice to know that for those who are tuning in, if you or someone you know is impacted by the potential of a divorce situation, our friends at Meriwether and Tharp are standing by to help you get some answers to some questions about one of the most scary and confusing things that you're ever going to go through. And what I have loved about Meriwether and Tharp, well, nobody loves divorce, of course. What I have loved about Meriwether and Tharp is their level of dedication to be generous with the quality of service they provide to folks who find themselves facing this very challenging and tricky situation. And that dedication is said, we need to be beyond just our Atlanta roots, and we need to put attorneys' offices in other cities throughout the state. For instance, there's a brand new office open in Columbus. Obviously, a lot of Georgia fans driving by Columbus on their way to Auburn on Saturday. In that Columbus area, there is now a Meriwether and Tharp attorney's office, the same way there are in other cities across the state: Savannah, Peachtree City, Carrollton, Athens. And these are attorneys that are embedded in these communities, ready to provide you the level of service that you deserve to get you through this very challenging time and perhaps get you set up for happiness and a more enjoyable next season of your life, taking advantage of that opportunity, doing what needs to be done now so that things can be better in the future. Who wouldn't want to do that? Our friends at Meriwether and Tharp can help you with that. So please find them online. It's GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. That is GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. Meriwether and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. All right, we got Terrence Edwards here coming up in just a little bit. Also, important update before we're done on a Georgia commit who's been in the news lately. New information coming out on that. We'll give that to you before we're done today there as well. Prior to that, though, let's go around the Dawghouse, presented today by our friends at Daytona Beach. And boy, do I love Daytona Beach, and I am thankful to have them as a part of our show. I want to do a couple of different things here before we bring on Terrence Edwards, starting with this. We got our first official availability report for the Georgia-Auburn game, Georgia side, yesterday. A couple of names listed as questionable were interesting. Ernest Green, the offensive lineman who's working his way back from injury, he was listed as questionable. And alongside him, Monroe Freeling was listed as questionable as well. My assumption is, assumption's often wrong, but my assumption is that Green's questionable will probably turn into him not playing on Saturday, if I had to guess. I believe he's still battling injury. I could be wrong. I'm not a medical expert, of course, but that's my best guess on Green. Seems like he has been still pretty limited at practice. The Freeling part of this, though, going back to the earlier part of the week, coming off an ankle injury against Kentucky, we were led to believe that maybe Freeling's ankle was better than it was initially feared to be. When you have an ankle injury, you never really know. I half jokingly said that my experience is every ankle injury ends up being a little bit worse than you assumed it was going to be. Seems like that was the case, but Smart did strike a hopeful tone earlier this week. The questionable status, I would say, for Freeling is just that. Maybe he can, maybe he can. I think there are still lots of questions about his overall status. When Smart spoke at the SEC coaches teleconference on Wednesday, he did give a little more information about where things stand with Freeling right now and essentially acknowledge what I just said. This is Kirby Smart from yesterday.
Monroe's been able to do a little bit. He's been able to run and work out and do some things, but it's still going to be more like today, tomorrow. We find more out. He has been moving around on it and running on it and doing some on-air things, but obviously the requirement it takes to be able to strain and play at this level, we got to find out if he's able to do that.
Yes, strain's an important word there. You've got to be able to hold your block. You've got to be able to keep their pass rushers away. The Auburn pass rush has been pretty successful this season. You got to be able to neutralize that. And I think if I had to guess, once again, my guesses sometimes are wrong. If I had to guess, the best case for Freeling is he might be able to play some. That the day itself may actually belong to Bo Hughley and Juan Gaston, the two offensive tackles that would be playing if Green and Freeling can't play. This may be sort of a Hughley-Gaston type of day, but if Freeling is at least available to play some, then that could make Georgia's task a little easier on Saturday. We have seen Georgia make changes to availability reports throughout the week. It's really the one on game day that the SEC pays the most attention to. the sense that I get is the SEC gives pretty wide leeway to these teams for what they want to do with their early week availability report. We've seen Georgia make changes in the past. Sometimes that's to upgrade players. Sometimes that's to downgrade players. So Georgia does use each of these availability reports to give us new information from time to time. So very good chance this status, either for better or worse, does change for Freeling. We'll just have to watch to see if it does. Now, before I bring on Terrence Edwards, can I do something just for fun, just for a second? Because a guy that some of y'all know, I had a great privilege of doing an event with him a few weeks ago. Mark Schlabach from ESPN has written an awesome story at ESPN.com this week that I would really encourage you to go read on their platform. Incredible story looking back at one of the most memorable Georgia-Auburn games of my childhood, the 1986 game, which is known as Between Hoses, when Georgia got the shocking upset win, had to use a backup quarterback that day named Wayne Johnson. James Jackson, the starting quarterback, his, grandparent had died. He had to go to the funeral. Johnson stepped in and led Georgia to what at the time was, at least in my childhood memory, a pretty improbable win. Georgia fans stormed the field after the game, which they probably shouldn't have done. Auburn officials then chose to turn the hoses on the Georgia fans, which they definitely shouldn't have done. And Schlabach's story retells all of this from the perspective of, frankly, just how dangerous this turned out to be, because even the Georgia fans that didn't storm the field, that were in the stands, they got pelted by all of this too. Barbara Dooley, for instance, in the story talks about driving home from Auburn that night covered in water, and she didn't storm the field, but she was covered in water. And this is, by the way, not a yard sprinkler. These are essentially fire hoses. It's pretty dangerous, it would seem. And you can see this on YouTube. It's actually worth going to find the video of this. Y'all, it's crazy. I mean, it's lawless and it's wild, and it's the SEC that I grew up around. It's one of the reasons why I love the league as much as I do right now. But here's the other thing, and this is why I think you need to read the story at ESPN.com, because I'm reading the story just because I know the game and it's a great childhood memory of mine. But buried late in this story was a nugget I was not aware of. Now, maybe y'all knew this. I didn't know this. It's really good reporting by Mark Schlabach, that Gunner Stockton's grandfather, who has since passed away, Gunner Stockton's grandfather was one of the Georgia fans who got arrested that day. And Stockton's grandfather was actually quoted in the AJC at the time, and he tells a great story of pleading with the Auburn officials not to turn the hoses on because, as he said it, elderly people in the stands are going to get hurt by all of this. And he's quoted in the story, and Mr. Stockton's son is also quoted and retelling the way in which he was, had learned about this over the years too. Y'all, this is such a good story. Schlabach does such a good job with this. He obviously knows Georgia so well. This is one of the wildest games of my childhood. I love looking back on it, remembering it. And I think if you want to get in the right frame of mind for this Georgia-Auburn game on Saturday, I'm just telling you, you need to do it. You need to go read this. You need to go find the YouTube video. It's amazing. Barbara Dooley's also got a great quote in the story where she talks about Gunner's grandfather, and she says, listen, I'm just glad to know that Gunner's grandfather was so feisty, or something along those lines. It's a great quote. It's a great line. It's just an awesome experience. I'm going to tell you right now, and I'll bring on Terrence after this. This is, as I said before, this is the college football that I grew up with, because Georgia in 1986 wasn't a great team. It wasn't a great season. Georgia lost to Clemson. It only made I think it's the Hall of Fame Bowl. It lost to Boston College in a bowl game. This was not a great team. This was not a great season. But what a great memory. And I think about my grandfather and how happy he was to see Georgia win this game. I think about the way in which my dad and I would talk about stuff like this. Like, this is, to me, what the Georgia-Auburn rivalry is all about, and what college football in general is all about. That we can't win every game, but when we do win some of them, man, we'll tell the stories the rest of our life. And I love that. And that is Around the Dawghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Daytona Beach. And by the way, speaking of making great memories, we've been doing that at Daytona Beach for a long time too. I grew up going to Daytona Beach. Every childhood vacation I ever had was at Daytona Beach. And so when we do, this spot each week and I see the Ponce Inlet Lighthouse, the Main Street Pier, or Daytona International Speedway, all those landmarks that make Daytona Beach famous, I'm thinking about the fact that, I'm thankful for how I grew up, but I'm also thankful for the memories still being made at Daytona Beach all the time and your opportunity to be a part of those memories yourself. In fact, it's a great time to get away for a fall beach getaway. Georgia's got an off week coming up. There's all kinds of fun opportunities here late fall heading towards winter and better savings than you perhaps realize. So check out DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals to find out more about that. That's DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals, and you can be a part of a great, great experience here at Daytona Beach. We are thrilled to have them as a part of Around the Dawghouse. Also happy to have all of you with us here today as well. Fun stuff coming up later on. Update on what's the latest on Jay Lamar. But for now, on everything as the Dogs get ready for Auburn from a guy that knows what it's like to be a part of these games. Let's talk to Terrence Edwards here today. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We bring in Terrence Edwards here. We always love our conversation with him. Terrence, you're younger than me. Did you grow up knowing anything about that 86 Auburn game? Have you ever seen the YouTube video, fans run the field on the road, which you're not really supposed to do? Like, these hoses are dangerous. Like, this YouTube video is one of the craziest things you'll ever see. I mean, the adults, when I was a kid, were acting wild at these games. Like, it was crazy. Did you ever grow up seeing that or anything?
No, that's my first time hearing this story.
You got to go look it up. And apparently, Gunner Stockton's grandfather, who's since passed away, Gunner Stockton's grandfather was there, one of the guys that got arrested, but he's also trying to, make peace in the situation. Mark Schleybaugh, I don't know if you know Mark or not, but Mark Schleybaugh, yeah. Great job telling that story. It's worth reading. Really, really good look back on history, and it's an all-timer. Did you go to the 96 game that your brother played in? And that was also an all-time thriller. That's the one where UGA tried to bite Robert Baker and Georgia won in overtime. Your brother played great. Did you go to the 96 Georgia Auburn game?
I'm pretty sure I did. And it was funny that I actually played with and against Robert Baker in the Canadian Football League.
Did he ever talk about the fact that UGA almost took a bite out of him?
Oh, we've had many conversations about how UGA almost took his leg off. So it's a great memory. That is one of the greatest pictures in Georgia history. So I got an opportunity to know Robert, and we've always joked about that picture.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome thing. And so we were talking before you joined us. Davin Bellamy yesterday says, hey, Georgia's got to get off to a fast start. Kirby Smart says, well, of course you want to get off to a fast start all the time. So from your perspective, it's clearly – it's good to play well the entire game, but it does set the tone for the game when you do play well right out of the blocks. What is the key for doing that? Is there something that makes that a little easier?
I just think the players just has to execute the game plan. I think coaches put so many hours and have so much information that they're going to put the players in the best possible position. Now the players have to go out and execute the game plan to the best of their ability. And for me, when I say fast start, I may be a little different than everyone else. We don't have to go down and score points on that first drive, but I would like to see us get several first downs and not just a 3 and out. That's 3 and out is where it's demoralizing now. We start looking like, here we go again. But if we could get several first downs and move the football, and because it's a chess match at first. It's a chess match. And I think against Kentucky, we went down and scored, and that was a perfect drive. So we have to continue to just move the football and find success, not just scoring to get a field goal, just moving the ball. Even if we just flipping the field, making Auburn go the long way instead of getting a 3 and out. 3 and out is something that we can't have.
Yeah, no, I think that reminds me of – I'm a baseball fan. It reminds me of baseball where if I'm the leadoff hitter watching a lot of playoff baseball right now, even if I don't get on base my first at bat, if I take 7 pitches, then that's probably a win for my team. I've got a chance to see a lot of what this pitcher's doing. I'm putting a little bit of a tax on him. And the football analogy on that is, like you said, okay, well, I may not score a touchdown my first drive, but if I put a couple of first downs together, then, Terrence, it just seems to me that I'd have a pretty good idea of the stuff that I brought with me from a game plan standpoint, what is working. And and what might have a better chance of working throughout the game, right?
Oh, most definitely. That's my point of, we have to put several first downs together, and that's accomplished several things. It's just now we're trying to figure out is the information that we received through our game plan is correct. Is the game plan correct? How they're playing us. Did they throw any new wrinkles in? So you got several plays to kind of dissect what they're doing early on, and then it's just field position. If you get a touchback and you get a 3 and out, now you're punting the ball away. Field position is a big key in these type of games. So it just kills it does a lot just getting several first downs. We would love to go and score, but just getting several first downs also helps the morale of an offense and of a team as well.
All right, so on the flip side of that, and I try not to be too superstitious, but boy, it seems like if you go on the road and if it starts going a little bit bad, it has the potential of just compounding even more. That momentum ends up feeling like a thing. And I joked a little earlier, it feels like when you're playing one of these road games, it's third down like every 3 seconds, and that crowd's getting loud and they're blaring the music. Auburn's got their DJ, pretty much everybody does now. And it just feels like that bad things have a tendency to compound and get worse. As someone who's played in a lot of games that have the big atmosphere, how much as a player did you notice that where it feels like if we're on the road and things start sliding, we got to be careful that it doesn't just slide off the cliff, because sometimes in these road environments, it can feel, whether it's true or not, the feeling is that's the way that some of this is heading.
Yes, Jordan Harris was my favorite stadium playing outside of Athens. The environment is just electric there. When the Eagle go around the stadium and it swoops down, and the Auburn is right there outside of outside of LaGrange.
Sure.
So it feels like you still in state because there's so many players on Auburn team that's from Georgia. So this environment here is one of the best environments I played in. And like you said, going down and playing an SEC road game, I don't care what the record has been. I don't care how many times that we've beaten them in a row. This would be a tough environment to play in. Even though we're the favorite, we're the better team, we should win. But you just never know. I mean, I had a conversation with Damian Gary when we was at the game this past weekend, and just thinking about the Kentucky games of why we struggle so much playing in Lexington, and the games are so tight, but when they come to Athens, it's just lopsided. And just playing on the road against any SEC team, if things don't go your way early, to your point, it could be a long day for us. So we got to go in and I know Kirby them has emphasized third down. Let's get off the field. Let's get off the field. So I'm gonna be looking early on if can we get off the field early on against them, or the trend is going to continue with the third down struggles.
Of course, I know the Georgia Auburn game is also personal for you because a good friend of yours was a great player at Auburn too. You've been talking to your guy Takeo Spikes this week.
I haven't spoke to him yet. I'm sure the group chat will at some point start up with myself, my brother, George Foster. People don't know George Foster and Takeo are first cousins.
Is that
So
right? I
they're
did not know
cousins.
that.
So
Yeah, did not know that.
yeah. So Takeo and Georgia are related, close related. So those four of us in the group chat at some point will happen. I just haven't had an opportunity to start that up yet.
Going back to last week, I know you're a fan of him. We all are, but what'd you think about the really kind of a breakout performance for Dylan Bell, who had, as Kirby Smart credited him, had been patient, waiting for his moment. And man, it came in a big way on Saturday. A couple of beautiful catches, 2 rushing touchdowns, creatively used in the Georgia offense. How much did you love what you got from Dylan Bell this past Saturday?
As I've said before, I think that's where Dylan Bell thrives.
Mm-hmm.
Just making him a pure wide receiver didn't fare well for him, in my opinion. I just think he's a football player, as you would say, given the ball in all type of situations. He's a physical runner. He's a gifted runner with the football in his hands. As you can see, once he just touched the ball in many different ways, now he is very confident in his ability, as we can see with this one hand catch, and he had a dig route that he made as well. So I just think getting him to football in many different ways it's best for him. And I think the best that we saw him play when he was forced to play tailback, now his ability as a football player just took over and he didn't think a lot. Just playing just a solely wide receiver didn't bowl well for him. And I like that Georgia was able to get him touches in multiple ways.
It's obviously been a rough go for Talon Taylor lately. He had I know the moment he would love to have had back against Alabama. You know, we talked about that last week. Drops happen. Of course, it's going to happen to anybody. He had to deal with one. And then we find out he also got injured during practice. And it seems like, you know, that's going to be a setback for him. That's going to, I guess, end his 2025 season. And obviously, he'll be working to make his recovery. You know, as somebody who's been around the game for a long time that knows receiver position, what would your message be to Taylor right now of, man, you know, just about as crummy a week as anybody can have, and now building back, obviously just as much of a talented prospect as he ever was, of course. But what's your message to Taylor now as he begins the road back after this, you know, unfortunate injury setback?
Yes, I tried to give him a call after that game, and you know, I was able to talk to his mother, and just trying to give him some words of encouragement, just let him know, you know, I've been there. We all have. If you played this game long enough, some point you're gonna have a play that you want back, and unfortunately, he has the injury that's probably gonna keep him out for the rest of the season. And I know he do not want to end his freshman campaign on that play. So he's a strong-minded individual. He's come from a good family. His mother is a softball coach, former softball player herself, so she understands the mentality of an athlete because she is one herself. So he's gonna fight back. He's talented. I mean, if you just saw the speed, the burst on that play to get behind the Alabama defender. So I'm excited for the young man. I can't wait for spring football for him to be able to get out there and just play football again. And he's just got to rehab now and just continue to get stronger, get faster, take care of your schoolwork, and just be a 19-year-old kid
Yeah.
and just enjoy life right now.
Let me ask you a broad question to finish it off here. What do you want to see from Georgia offensively on Saturday? We've now seen 5 games in total. You know, 3 SEC games. We've seen a pretty good collection of Georgia, you know, on that side of the ball here this season against different levels of opponents. Going into a road game that's obviously crucial for UGA. What do you hope the offensive game plan looks like?
I want to see us continue to run the football
Yep.
and put Gunner in position to use his legs a little bit more. I think that's where his game excels, is being able to the zone read, the counter game, QB counters, him throwing on a run. Uh, no, just him sitting in the pocket doesn't bring out his strengths. You have to be able to move him in the pocket. I think the RPO game that we brought a little bit more last week, he's done that his whole life, so he understands that aspect of the game. But I've been really, really happy with the way we've ran the football this year and the emphasis that we've put on running the football. And running the football carries. That is a term that you always hear. Doesn't matter the weather, doesn't matter the situation. Running game carries, and we've been able to run the football on everyone that we've played so far, and we got to continue to lean on that. And I'm ready to see Nate bust out again. Chauncey have ran the football very well. I'm happy that we probably got back to kind of a two-man rotation,
Yeah.
and having number two, the transfer, come in on short yardage because he is a big human being. But just the run game and the way we've run it, I've been very pleased in our ability to run the football.
I think it's well said, Terrence, is why I'm glad I asked you that. Always sharp analysis. Appreciate that. And of course, you're also providing that same football expertise to the next generation of pass catchers, whether it be flag football, tackle football, everything else in between. Terrence, if folks want to connect with the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy, how can they do so?
Hey, I want to give a big shout out to my man Dax Langley. He's going to bring his son up
Is that right?
this weekend. Yes, Dax is contacting me this week, and he has a son over at Athens Academy with Andrew,
Yeah.
Coach Mark's son, and they're throwing it around over there. So at some point, I'm gonna get with Dax's son, and we're gonna get him started in the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Well,
So
I
if
can tell you
anyone
a little intel on that. Dax's young son is a very good football player. Andrew is there as well. That Athens Academy Middle School team is a tough one to tussle with. So
yes,
they've had a lot of success.
Dax sent me some video last night, and I'm like, man, Dax, where did he get this athletic ability from? I guess he got it from the mother. So I'm excited to see him in person and get to work with Dak's son. And so if anyone else is looking, you can find me on all social media platforms at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrence, that's great stuff. I appreciate it. Enjoy the game this weekend.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, it's funny. We got a lot of former Georgia players. You see their sons around, whether it be middle school or moving towards high school, and it's always kind of a fun thing to see. Obviously, I love my connection to Georgia high school football, and there's always a little something special when some of these, oh yeah, I recognize that name. Oh yeah, knew his father and know him, and you see them having great success, and it's an awesome thing to be able to see. I'll also say this before we go cruising here in a minute, that when you ask Terrence, hey, what do you want to see offensively? I think that Terrence's answer there is very similar to what most Georgia fans' answer is right now. Let's take the things that Georgia has been doing, and let's build that as the bedrock for Saturday, too. It is running game. Chauncey Bowens replicating. I mean, right now, Bowens is, I think, one of the kind of the bigger stories in this team. He's turned out to be a very good player, better than I probably gave him credit for. So that's my mistake, my error, but he looks pretty good right now. And then Gunner Stockton, as we've said, you've got these disparate outcomes where it's leading rush against Marshall, don't really run it much against Austin Peay, didn't really run much against Alabama, 2 rushing touchdowns first quarter against Kentucky. I think the best of Georgia includes Gunner on the ground every single game. And if you've got Gunner with his legs, the multifaceted component of the Georgia running game, including some really creative runs too, the likes of which the Dylan Bell benefited from, then from that, you can build the passing game on top of that. And that, just to me, seems like the most successful version of Georgia. And honestly, it sounds like a pretty good recipe for winning against Auburn. And to go back to what Davin said, you bring that out from the word go. If Gunner's sneaking out and getting you a few yards on first or second down, now third down's more manageable. And if Georgia's just sort of slowly, to use the old phrase, matriculating the ball down the field with the running game, all of a sudden that crowd gets restless. They remember they don't like Hugh Freeze very much. And that's how you take the air out of the balloon. Maybe that's what Georgia has a chance to do on Saturday. All right, let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC here right now, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Remind you, you've got an opportunity to be with us on board Utopia of the Seas coming up this April for our DawgNation cruise. One of the great heritage events that we've been a part of for a good long time, something I'm personally very proud of. And I am thankful for really the friendships that I've made because of our DawgNation cruise. Hundreds of Georgia fans I've got to know, I otherwise wouldn't know. And I see them on social media, or you run into them during in Athens on a game day or DawgNation Invasion event, things like that. And I'm just grateful for it. It's the relationships. It's like the world's biggest cliche is, the real whatever is the friends we made along the way. But in some respects, honestly, that's what Georgia football really is. It's your relationships. And I think one of my great sources of new friendships and new relationships has been our DawgNation cruise. So I love the chance to celebrate with those folks coming up again this April, and can't wait to hopefully add some new friends to that list coming up this year too. If you want to book your stay on our DawgNation cruise, Jessica Slater can help you do so. 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. All right, so as we go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean right now, I want to mention, and we'll talk a lot more about this tomorrow, Jeff Sintel reporting last night along with Kaylee Manziel on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger as it relates to Jay Lamar's status at Colquitt County. There had been a story at DawgNation.com earlier this week about Lamar not being a part of that Colquitt County team. I know high school football pretty deeply entrenched. I have immense respect for Colquitt County's coaching staff. Sharp guys. Sean Calhoun's great head coach. This is one of the most buttoned-up professional teams in the entire state of Georgia. Of course, that's true. And so, that's a coaching staff that's got a lot of experience on a lot of issues, and apparently a little bit of a, however you want to describe it, enough so that they maybe came to the decision of, we don't think Lamar's a guy that we can have around here right now. But obviously they remain open to that status changing. And it seems like now, based on what was discussed last night before the hedges presented by Kroger, that Lamar now does have a chance to be back on the team and finish his senior season with Colquitt County. We'll get more details from Jeff about this when he joins us tomorrow. My point on stuff like this is always really simple. It's one of the reasons why, not to get on a soapbox, I don't really love NIL for high school, because what I really view high school to be is, to me, high school is a preparation for players who are themselves a work in progress. In high school, you are not a man. Now, you may be as big as a man, but you are not a man yet. You are developing to be a man, and your coaches are helping you do that. And in real life, that's not always a pretty and seamless process. It's just not. There are some growing pains. There are some moments in which, hey, boy, this is not a fairy tale. This is real life, and we've got some butting of heads or whatever it is that's going on. I'm not in Moultrie. I won't pretend to know, but I do trust those coaches to help develop players like Jay Lamar or anybody else to be the best version they can be. And as I said before, that's not always easy and seamless and magical and fairy tale like. No, sometimes it can be a little bit messy. And so it certainly sounds like through this process, Georgia is stuck by Lamar. And frankly, it sounds like through this process, Colquitt County is stuck by Lamar too, to give him a chance to do the growing up that every young man needs to do. We are always the same, whether it be a guy that's going to play at Georgia, or a guy that does play at Georgia, or a guy that plays for one of Georgia's rivals. My number one rule in life, and not everybody likes this, and frankly, I don't care. My number one rule in life, I want to take football away from a player only as a last resort. And I want to exhaust every other possibility I have before I take football away from any player. Because I think that football makes men. And I think when you take football away from an emerging young man, I think you run the risk of making him less of a man than he would have a chance to be. And what a disservice that would be. So sounds like Lamar's going to have a chance to continue to participate for Colquitt County. Sounds like he's still going to be, at least according to what I've been told, second hand, third hand, still going to be a part of this Georgia class here in 2026. And I would invite you to go back and watch the commitment ceremony that we had a chance to broadcast for Jay going back a couple months ago now. Jay was very open about telling his story during all of that, and very emotional about the chance to play college football after what he himself said that he had been through. So perhaps revisiting that worth doing, and maybe like a lot of stories involving young teenagers as they're, figuring life out, a little messy in the moment, can have a happy ending before it's all said and done. Jeff Sintel will give us more details on that coming up tomorrow. As far as football goes here this weekend, one of the games in the SEC we have our eye on is Oklahoma and Texas. And the status of John Mateer here is fascinating. The spread experts will tell you, most players injury-wise don't have any true spread value. Even if it's, say, like a good linebacker or a good running back. Oftentimes, even if it's a good player, their absence, because the team they play for has a backup that's probably pretty good too, if you're at the high SEC level, that the average injury to one guy is just not as significant to the outcome of a game as fans sometimes give it credit for. A cluster of injuries within the same position group certainly can be, multiple offensive line injuries, something that, by the way, Georgia's dealt with, that can be impactful to the final score of a game, but one individual injury oftentimes not. Quarterback, though, is different. Quarterbacks can have value all the way up to like a full touchdown on the point spread. We're led to believe that John Mateer for Oklahoma, in terms of his perceived value, is one of those guys. So will he or won't he play in this Red River shootout game is a very big deal. The official availability report status for Mateer is questionable. My assumption is, and once again, my assumptions are often wrong, but I make them anyway. My assumption is that if you think a guy is hurt, he probably is. And I assume that Mateer is probably hurt. He may try to give it a go, but giving it a go at less than 100% is no more valuable than the backup would probably be in that situation. So Texas has been a small favorite. That line has moved. Seemed like it may be moving in the direction of Oklahoma, whether Mateer plays or not. There's obviously a lot of doubt out there about Texas right now. I do think, though, that the biggest mistake we have a tendency to make, going back to like year one of the college football playoff after Ohio State lost to Virginia Tech, or even last year when Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois, we have a tendency to write off so-called playoff contenders too quickly. Well, we know so-and-so is not going to make the playoff now, and now that Texas is unranked and lost a couple of times and tarnished its preseason number one ranking, people want to do the same thing and just assume that Texas is done. And obviously they haven't played very well, and Arch Manning's been in the spotlight for some of that. But I get the sense that Texas is not quite done. And I do get the sense they're going to remind folks of that on Saturday. And frankly, I'm already on guard for what's going to be very annoying, is that after making Arch Manning this impossibly overrated figure and jamming that down our throats, the media has now found a way to turn him into a sympathetic figure because he didn't live up to their initial hype. And now they're going to jam the new sympathetic status of Arch Manning down our throats. When most of us who are normal, all we really want is people just to talk about Arch Manning less. We didn't want people to praise him when they were praising him for little reason. We don't want them trashing him now for also fairly little reason. We just want people to talk about Manning less. But somehow that's not ever part of this. There was obviously the huge response to a, frankly, pretty weird article at The Athletic here this week. And somehow it still results us having to listen to every single person on the planet give their take on Arch Manning, when most of us who just want to enjoy college football were like, what if we talked about some of the other players that played this sport, at least for a couple of minutes? Would that even be possible? So nonetheless, that's the story there on that. Let me squeeze in one more here real quick. Obviously, speaking of overhyped and, oh my gosh, the Bill Belichick thing, we predicted this. We get plenty wrong. We didn't just get this right. We got it precisely exactly right. That Belichick is a total disaster, did not count the cost of what he was signing up for. North Carolina as an institution embarrassed itself by going down this road, really tarnished its reputation by being willing to hitch its wagon to someone like Belichick, who was so obviously not in a serious phase of his career. There had been rumors and reports that Belichick was looking to step down, that he wanted to try to get a buyout, that he might go try to work in the media, that coaches were looking for other jobs. They're trying to pin this on some recruiting violations and this and that. There was a weird thing involving the New England Patriots where the former Carolina quarterback Drake May had success with the Patriots, but Belichick didn't want to congratulate him on social media, which is just the most petty and foolish thing in the world. This was very easy to predict. Anyone who was paying close attention should be able to recognize this. Belichick has been a successful coach, but almost like, you ever seen the old movie, Citizen Kane? It's almost like Bill Belichick, other than the young girl he always has with him, has almost become like Charles Foster Kane, where he's just kind of in a prison of his own making, that his success has created an ego that has essentially handcuffed him to a desk, and that he can't seem to escape that, cannot seem to relate to other humans. It's really a cautionary tale. North Carolina should have known better than this. Bill Belichick shows you that sometimes what we think of as worldly success doesn't quite add up to the level of happiness that you think it's supposed to. Belichick does not seem like a very happy man right now. Does not seem, greatest pro coach probably of all time. I would certainly listen to an argument. There's never been a better coach in the NFL than Bill Belichick. But college football is just different, and you have to understand college football. And you can't understand college football if you're not willing to humble yourself enough to learn. And I don't know that Belichick is, and that's what seems to be happening right now. We'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. All right, a couple shouts out before you get ready to go here, starting with this. Now, Georgia has got a big opportunity at the end of this regular season. Got a rivalry game on Saturday, Deep South's oldest. The rivalry we typically think of as clean old-fashioned hate, although it's using a different moniker this year. It's going to be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Now, that is a real opportunity for Georgia fans. It's supposed to be a Tech home game, but Tech has chosen to do business here at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which we think is great because it creates a chance for Georgia to get in the stadium. And Georgia fans who have a history of painting Bobby Dodd Stadium red and black, but that's a much smaller venue than this is. If you want to really make this a Georgia home game, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, a place that Georgia fans already know well, this is your chance to do that. So we're completely self-serving here. We think this is a great chance for Georgia. And frankly, when you see the outrageous ticket prices for some of these games throughout the year, your most accessible ticket to what's honestly shaping up to be a really big game. I mean, you give Tech credit. They're undefeated. They're winning games. They're doing all kinds of stuff. Give them credit for that. We think this is a great chance for Georgia to neutralize whatever excitement and enthusiasm Tech has by having tens upon tens of thousands of Georgia fans there in the stadium. So check out mercedes-benzstadium.com/events to get your tickets. I want Georgia fans there. I believe you will be there. mercedes-benzstadium.com/events. You can get your tickets today. Also, real quick, our friends at Cercheros. Speaking of big-time games, watch them with friends, going for the tailgate. Of course, the awesome fresh Mex food of Cercheros is a great way to enjoy all of that. The bowls, the burritos, the quesadillas, everything else that Cercheros is famous for. What a great way to make that a part of your game day experience. There's 40 locations here across the state and throughout the South, so it's a great chance for you to get that delicious fresh Mex. And if you want to just go try it for yourself, I went to the Alpharetta location the other day, had a wonderful meal. They prepare it freshly for you. They'll put the veggies on the grill. They just take great care to make sure every item you enjoy from Cercheros tastes exactly the way that it's supposed to taste. So make sure you check out more online, Cercheros.com for that. That is Cercheros.com for a lot more on that. Enjoy the fresh Mex of Cercheros prepared by friendly folks. Make it a part of your lunch choice this afternoon or a big game day or a tailgating event coming up for the catering. You can get all of that. Our friends at Cercheros, man, they're a big part of what we do here around game day on DawgNation, and we are glad about that. Something else we've had some fun with here this week is making a bit of an enemy and a villain out of the lousy, stinking Gator, Jesse Palmer, critical of the Georgia defense. Hey, Georgia defense needs to play better. We don't deny that. But when we can make an external foe just to give us something to focus on, well, of course, we're going to do that. A couple of golden shoes with that in mind here right now. Athens Forever on X writes in to say, you can't hide from those bad takes forever. Where's Jesse? That's what we said we wanted to hear folks asking on Saturday. Georgia defense goes out and proves him wrong. Where's Jesse? Does he still think that Georgia defense can't do anything? Good stuff from Athens Forever there. A very scowl-looking face, a dour-looking face. Having some fun with that. Really good stuff. Also, the real Georgia on tap. We talked about the 1980s a little earlier. Commercial from the 80s. You remember, if you're old like me or you were a kid back in the 80s, where's the beef? How about where's Jesse? Real Georgia on tap, throwing it back for Throwback Thursday. We'll give him a golden shoe there. Yeah, maybe Georgia will play well enough on defense on Saturday that they can call out Jesse Palmer and say, hey, you doubted us. You said we weren't good. Where are you at right now? Because this Georgia defense, we think, can have a big bounce-back performance against Auburn. We certainly hope that's the case. And by the way, speaking of the lousy, stinking Gators, long time since Florida's beaten Georgia, about 1,797 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That's our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a great day. We're back tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs, they show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price promise. You can trust them on all of that today. All right, we're going to get some comments, and we'll see how folks are doing. UJ Marine says he feels bad for the North Carolina players that went to North Carolina. I think they were going to get that Hall of Fame level coaching. Yeah, I do too, because in this situation, the adults should know better. Board of Regents, athletic department officials, they should have recognized this was a huge mistake. And there's been plenty of reporting. There was a lot of infighting about whether or not Belichick should have been hired. So there were people in Chapel Hill that did know this was a bad idea. But you can't fault the players. You can't fault the players because their level of discernment just not going to be quite as high. And I think you probably see that on display. And I'm just telling you right now, man, this should be a cautionary tale. And you hate to use a person as a cautionary tale, but this should be that success can become a problem. Now, success can be a good thing. You can lean on your institutional knowledge to have more success. But it does not always work that way. Sometimes your success becomes this barrier where now no one can tell you anything. You're not willing to consider new ideas. You're not willing to address your shortcomings. Because you've had success, you assume that you are successful. But success is not really a static situation. You know, what's the line about empires are always rising and falling in America? I'm not even sure where that even comes from, but I would say that to an extent it's true. You look at the highest tax bracket, for instance. People are moving in and out of the highest tax bracket all the time. You know, there is a hierarchy in life, but it's not a static hierarchy. People are moving up and down depending on the choices and the efforts they're making in that given moment. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that successful people can make is assume that there is some sort of entrenched status that they have earned that can't be taken from them. But success has to be re-earned every day. And I think the Belichick has obviously forgotten that. He's really embarrassing himself. And when you get to the point where no one can tell you anything, there's no one to save you from yourself. And it just seems, in his least judgmental way as I can say this, it just seems obvious that's what Belichick is falling prey to. Bill Camacho says, can we run the table by winning out and getting the SEC championship game? The answer is, of course, yes. But, as I've said before, I am probably less certain about the outcomes for Georgia than I have been at any point in time in the 2020s thus far. From 2021 until now, going on 5 seasons, this is the least certain I've been about Georgia. Georgia will, I believe, be a point spread favorite in every game the rest of the season. Almost certainly will be a point spread favorite in every game the rest of the season. That means that they will have a better than 50% chance of winning every game they play. But some of y'all are good at math. Let's say, let's just do an average. Let's say that Georgia has, we'll even be slightly, conservative. Let's say that Georgia has a 65% chance on average of winning every game it plays the rest of the season. Okay, well, that seems pretty good. It seems like that's probably actually a little bit better than what it actually is. But if on average we say that Georgia has a 65% chance of winning each game that it plays the rest of the season, the actual chance of Georgia winning all of those games means, like I said, some of y'all are better at math than I am. The actual chance of running the table and winning all those remaining regular season games is probably only about 20%. Am I right about that? Somebody double check me on that. I believe I'm probably about right on that. That if you've got on average a 65% chance of winning each game, your chance of winning all those games is probably about 20%. So that's about what it is for Georgia. On any given Saturday, Georgia has a better chance of winning than not. For the collective total of those Saturdays, odds makers would suggest Georgia's not likely to win them all. But about 1 out of every 5 theoretical seasons, they would. And that feels about right to me. Let's see what else. Randy Hall says, by the way, it's good to see Randy. I feel like I missed Randy. He says, will Jesse be back on The Bachelor since he's not very good with football? Yeah, maybe Georgia can send him back to The Bachelor. Although I'm guessing he'd probably like that too. Garrison Tucker says, what's your guess on time of possession for each team on Saturday? I think they both want it. I think that both teams are probably better with ball control than they are with explosives. Although I do think that Auburn's going to try to crank up their skill guys a little bit more. They probably haven't gotten it to Singleton as much as they could, haven't gotten it to Cam Coleman as much as they could. So I think that Georgia definitely wants to win the time of possession battle. I think Auburn would like to. But I think that Auburn is probably a little more keyed on, got to get the explosives going. SEM Dog says, what in the world was UNC thinking about hiring a washed-up coach in his 70s? Look, this is the same fallacy that a lot of people fall prey to, is that people can't see past celebrity, that somebody in the border region somewhere was completely enamored with the celebrity status of Bill Belichick, of why wouldn't you want to hire the most famous coach you could hire? But as I said when all this was happening, The SEC would have not been tricked by this. The SEC knows what the real job of college football requires. And being famous as a pro coach or being famous as a player, a la Deion Sanders, for instance, like that level of fame does not make the job of the actual coaching grind in college football, does not make it any easier. That there are people who can do it and there are people who can't. It is a specific skill. And for sure. Randy Hall asked about our high school game for this week. We have got Sprayberry against River Ridge. Be my first time being at River Ridge. I'm looking forward to that. And obviously Sprayberry's got a Georgia commit, Alabama commits, some big-time college prospects. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Very much looking forward to that. Let me hit some YouTube comments here. I will tell you that my voice is a little more sore today than it has been. I have not really had a lot of soreness. Dustin Anthony, thanks for being here today. Appreciate that. Craig Wade says the Auburn receivers concern me against our defensive backs. Yeah, I think the Auburn receivers are really good. I've said I think that Cam Coleman's probably the best receiver in the SEC. I do think that Auburn has a little bit of difficulty getting it to him, but I think that being concerned about the Auburn receivers makes some sense. Jerry Dogfan says he doesn't feel like the Jay Lamar issue is anywhere near the Zach Evans issue. So I won't pretend to be an expert really on either issue because I'm just not there. But I do. The difference between Colquitt County and North Shore and Houston is that I do feel like I know about the Colquitt County staff, and I would just trust whatever decision they made. I really do. I would trust whatever decision they make. So if they felt like that he needed to be gone from the team for a while, I'd trust them on that decision. If they felt like it's okay to bring him back now, I would trust them on that decision. I can't speak to coaching staffs out of state because I just don't really know them. But I would trust the Colquitt County staff on that. Wyatt Fielden says, do you think Auburn plays 2 quarterbacks this weekend? Wyatt, I've been on guard for that, but we've also been the boy that cried wolf on that before too, because we were screaming that about Arch Manning going into last year's Texas games. It didn't happen. So we have been the boy that cried wolf on the multiple quarterbacks, but I have been wondering if Deuce and I would play. I really have been. If he does come in the game, crowd would roar. But it's also fair to point out that the one thing that Arnold does well is run. Hugh Freeze, using, I would say, a less overall talented quarterback than Jackson Arnold, has had success with running quarterback against Georgia. So I think they're going to really try that. I do think Auburn's going to, I think Auburn knows it needs to win this game. So am I on guard for Deuce Knight playing? Yes. But I'm probably always on guard for that, I guess, looking back on life. And oftentimes it has not quite worked out. Gary Roach says that Dylan Bell reminds him of Hines Ward, which is a fun comparison. Also says looking forward to meeting me tomorrow. Gary, I am there too. Gary already mentioned he's going to be at River Ridge, so I'm looking forward to that too. Craig Wade wants to know more about the Lamar situation. So last night's Before the Hedges, they talked about it. Jeff wrote a story about it. That's the best resource I can give you. Jeff's story, DawgNation.com, Jeff and Kaylee show on this DawgNation YouTube page. You can get more on that there. Julian Harris says styles make fights, and Georgia's stable of running backs has a style for every fight. Yeah, I like that. That's good. Steve Craig says, I hate that the offensive line is banged up, but the experience that Hughley and Gassner are getting is valuable down the stretch and into the playoffs. Well, I certainly agree with that, and I certainly hope they get a chance to showcase some of that in the college football playoff because I hope Georgia's there. But I think that's good. Paul Moon says you got to control the middle of the line of scrimmage, prevent the big running plays. It almost kind of goes back to the old, Gus Malzahn era where always seemed to be a threat with the wide jet sweep style run and then the power running back in between that. So that's something they always seem to do really well. Got to try to prevent that if you can. Looks like I'm going to have. Let's see if we get on Facebook here. Tyrone Brown says Davin Bellamy for defensive coordinator. Yeah, Davin's been really good. Davin's giving us a lot of very good stuff, and I'm very thankful for that. Grigo says that Bowen's going to go for $150. I'm telling you right now, he has been a revelation to me. We, did not give him enough credit before the season began. That was our error. We don't deny that. But man, he's been so good, so good. I mean, the runs to the outside, the runs towards daylight, the making tacklers miss. He's really been good at all of that. Spencer Clark on the number that, I think we talked about this yesterday. I think Schleybaugh, at least he was the first one that I saw that had this, has not started 2 freshmen along the offensive line since 2008, both on the right side. That's what Georgia's mostly been doing lately. Jerry Dog fan says Miami finally brought Dennis Wilson out of the bushes. Yeah, I saw Dennis in here earlier this week. So we've been doing this show for a long time, going on 11 years, and we have opposing fans that pop in here. Dennis, our resident Miami fan, is funny because, when Miami's bad, which over the course of the last decade is frequent, we'll go years without hearing from him. We'll hear from him for years. Then Miami wins a couple of games. All of a sudden, he's right back in here like he never left. There has definitely been some of that, and that's very funny. I'm trying to pull up the Facebook comment, y'all. I'm sorry. Paul Moon brings up a good point. I guess I hadn't really thought about it this way, but it's probably true. Is that Paul says that Bowens is probably a 4.65 downhill runner, but his vision is amazing and his burst has been fantastic. Yet to me, Chauncey Bowens, I hadn't really thought about this, but it seems true that his game speed seems to be a lot faster than his track speed, his workout speed. Because I'm like you, I don't really think of Bowens as someone who's historically measured as particularly fast. And I think that's why I'm maybe somewhat surprised by the success that he's had. But in a game, he's running away from people and running around people. He's really making athletic moves and making guys miss. I think that's tremendous. I do. And he was great in the Alabama game. It's a shame that Georgia squandered it, but he was great. And he really came back and brought some of that against Kentucky too. And what you're really hopeful for is that he can replicate that against Auburn on Saturday. Because if it's 3 weeks in a row, then that's a major part of your identity. That's a major part of your identity. D on the subject of Belichick saying if he was worth his salt as a coach, he could get anything from any player. I think what you see from Belichick now is two things. A, he's not the same coach he once was. Just not. He has allowed himself to slip. He's not as disciplined, for instance, as he once would have been. Also, I think that coaching in college football is not the same thing as coaching in the NFL. That if Belichick, for instance, and most Falcons fans probably glad he's not, but if Belichick was coaching here in Atlanta, he's probably having more success at Atlanta than he's having with North Carolina because I think he understood more about what the NFL game was about. I also think there's a chance, and this is a word we don't use a lot around men, I think there's a chance that Belichick's just sad. I think he's sad. I think the NFL decided that they were tired of him. And had he had one more coaching job, he could have broken Don Shula's record as the winningest coach in NFL history. And he's not going to get the chance to do that. And some of what you see from him right now, while we don't, like I said, we don't use this word. People are kind of scared of this word. But there's a chance that Belichick's malaise as a coach, that his embarrassing chapter here in the winter of his career, that it's just a function of sadness, that he wanted to break the record. He's a guy that obviously cares about the history of football. The NFL powers that be seem intent to prevent him from doing that. And it seems like he's probably sad about it. Arokit says Bill has no ego to care about records. I'm telling you right now, you could not be less correct. You could not be more wrong is what I mean to say. You could not be more wrong about that. Nice try, but you could not be more wrong. Paul Moon also mentioning the feud with Tom Brady, the fact that Brady leaves, Belichick goes on to win a Super Bowl with Tampa, and Belichick has struggled to have success without Brady. I would say that's also part of this too. Bob Fossil says, is there any correlation between Will Muschamp being less involved in the defense and what seems like a drop-off in production? I think it's a fair question. I would never be able to determine for sure how much it's mattered, But we do know, and it's easy to just say this, is that of course you would be better with Will Muschamp around. So that's a simple thing. We know that for a fact. Smart football lifer, experience around Kirby Smart, comfortable with the vernacular and the lingo. Of course, Georgia would benefit from having Will Muschamp. But how much is the inverse true, that Georgia's actually been really hurt by not having him? I think that's a little bit more difficult to know. I really do. I think that's a little bit more difficult to determine. We've obviously seen, and we don't have to shy away from this, people can think what they want and say what they want to say. We've seen more criticism of Glenn Schumann lately than we're used to seeing. Schumann, like a lot of successful assistant coaches on very successful teams, really lived a charmed life for a while where, most of the Georgia assistants could really do no wrong in the eyes of fans. That has changed for Schumann a bit. Schumann probably is an assistant coach now that I'm sure he, if I had to guess, probably feels like he could use a big performance. I'm guessing he probably would like to have a nice defensive game against Auburn on Saturday. Would be a great time for that to happen, to quiet down whatever exists. And I assume that Glenn Schumann is still the same good defensive coach I always thought that he was. But I don't deny what other people feel like they notice, which is that, hey, in some big spots as of late, Georgia's just not getting stops quite as frequently as it once was, and it's not really getting any pass rush at all. That's clearly got to be better. So I'm sure that even in the absence of Will Muschamp, Schumann's ready to once again demonstrate that he's still a top-flight defensive coordinator. As I said before, boy, Saturday would be a great time for that to happen. All right, so Gary Roach says that Dylan Bell reminds him. Yeah, my Facebook comments are just not loading, y'all, so I'm sorry. My voice is just really dry today or something. It hurts. Garrison Duggar says Muschamp would be a huge asset. Well, I didn't say that he wouldn't be. I mean, obviously, you'd like to have Muschamp here if you could. I'm not disputing that, but he's just not. That's not what he wants to do, and he's done enough professionally, made enough money that he can simply choose not to work, and that's right now what he's doing. So yeah, I mean, I'd gladly welcome. I don't know if that's a response to something I'd said, but yeah, I'd gladly welcome Muschamp back. That's just not an option. Matt Rugavina, wonderful to see more of Noah Thomas this weekend. Yeah, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I do think that it's a story. I do think a guy like this that you brought in ought to have a role. I know he plays a similar position to Colby Young, but we also saw him line up some in the slot on Saturday. And, whatever the explanation is, I just think you've got to get a guy like this involved in the game that, look, no one has enough talent anymore. But when you do have talented players, you got to find a way to extract the most production out of them. And it seems like Georgia's probably not doing that with Noah Thomas. That seems fair to say. I am getting some comments on Facebook now. They're talking about Jacob Alexander, talking about the Thunder Lightning thing. Yeah, I mean, I tell you, it's another feel-good story for Georgia. The obvious Thunder on any comparison is going to be Josh McCray. McCray is a big guy. I was looking at him on Saturday. I don't think I properly realized just how big he really is. Very big guy. He's been good in short yardage. I don't know that I would have ever had Bowens as my Lightning in a pair, because I would have always thought that Chauncey Bowens was the Thunder type guy. But honestly, in the old cliche of the Thunder Lightning comparison at running back, Bowens has been a Lightning style player for Georgia this year. Surprising for me, but it's been true. Yeah, so I'm getting some Facebook comments now. Jennifer Stevenson Fleming in here today. Miriam Corbin's in here today. You love to see about them. Joseph Kennedy, Philip Jordan Wells asking about Bo Walker. I think it's Joseph that asked about that, about Bo Walker. Yeah, I mean, we all heard plenty of good things about Bo, and we think those are probably still true. I think in all likelihood that Georgia has just become happy with its running backs now. That, it feels like it's got the role for cash on third down, that Josh McCray's got a short yardage value to Georgia, and that Bowens is becoming, along with obviously Nate Frazier, who's still a part of this, but Bowens is becoming a guy they feel pretty comfortable as a starter, and not quite a featured back, but certainly a guy they can give a lot of carries to. And eventually you do just have to pare down your rotation. And Maybe it's as simple as that for Dwight Phillips. At one point in time, we thought, well, maybe Phillips is going to be the guy for Georgia. And that was his own surprise for different reasons. I guess Dwight is also a little bit banged up, maybe, but we're seeing a lot less of him right now. Bo Walker was the talk of spring practice, fall camp, things like that. Probably still has a chance to be a very good player, but, incoming freshman first year, that kind of stuff has a tendency not to quite materialize the way that our highest hopes would lead us to believe it could. CK on the subject of Daniel Harris. So in the case of Harris, I believe this is mostly just a coach's decision. That right now, Georgia feels like DeMello Jones, Ellis Robinson, paired with Dalen Everett, just give him a better chance. I think we did see also in some dime situations, we saw DeMello and Ellis in the game at the same time. Did we not see that on Saturday? And look, I don't think that by any means Georgia's giving up on Daniel Harris or anything like that, but it does sound like, and Kirby's been pretty candid about this, it sounds like DeMello and Ellis have practiced better. So there's that. Ken Holcomb says he doesn't think that Dylan Bell can play quarterback like Hines Ward did, but otherwise Dylan Bell is a threat of many options on offense. That is true. He also did throw a touchdown pass against Tennessee in 2023, but you're probably right overall. When Ward came in and played for Georgia in 95, tag game, bowl game, he actually played pretty well. And it was, of course, a high school quarterback too. Hines Ward was amazing player. Amazing player. It's another one of those, seasons where like not a great team, not even a good team really. A lot of bad losses, frustrating losses, but a lot of good memories. Georgia played Tech on Thanksgiving Day that year in 95. Look, kind of a bad team, but some good memories. Spencer Clark says Delp's been huge in the run game with support with Lucky. Yeah, I mean, I thought that Lawson Lucky had an interesting quote this week about how even though it gets a lot of attention that the Georgia tight ends have not gotten quite as many receptions as they would like to have gotten, Lucky's like, listen, I feel like we're playing very well right now, and obviously that support and run game is a big part of that. And by the way, Oscar also had a big catch for Georgia on Saturday too that set up a touchdown. Paul Moon says he thinks Elias Williams still needs more weight before he can be a full-time starter. Yeah, I think that's true, and it's cool to see him have a couple moments on Saturday. He's obviously an awe-inspiring figure because he's so tall, but he's nowhere near as big as Darnell Washington was. I mean, no one is. But, it's height, but it's not quite the same level of thickness. Although Kirby did praise him for being a pretty good blocker in his Monday press conference. It reminds me of, once again, go back to coaching staffs. In the early days of Elias at Camden County, Jeff Herron was still his coach. And, Herron, who's retired, was a wing T coach. And they went on a little bit of a surprising postseason run. I can't remember if this was Elias's freshman or sophomore year. I can't remember. Just my memory fades. But, back then, Elias obviously wasn't getting the ball thrown to him very much because Herron was a wing T coach. But in some of the big upsets they pulled in the playoffs, a lot of people said that Elias as a blocker was doing really well in some of those wing T games. And so when Kirby complimented Elias's blocking this week, it did remind me of what we heard about him going back to early days as a prospect when they weren't really running an offense that probably matched his skill set quite as well, that Elias at the time was thought to be doing some really good things as a blocker. All right, anything else? Marshall Fleming says you got to know if Kirby could get Muschamp and Mark Stoops and his coaching staff, he'd do anything. Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that, Kirby already said that before the year began that Muschamp had a role on this team. Don't quite know what that means. Smart obviously didn't define it particularly clearly. And yeah, I mean, looks like Mark Stoops going to try to hold on to his job at Kentucky. But yeah, my guess is if Kirby could bring him in as an analyst, he'd probably want to do that too. I think you're right. All right, anything else? Bill Sanders on the subject of heat lightning. Yeah, that's what Rusty and I always joke about on Fridays about, early season, especially at these lightning delays. And we're always like, that's just heat lightning. I don't have to worry about that. That's just heat lightning. Because I grew up hearing a lot about heat lightning, but like a lot of the things that we heard growing up, there wasn't a real scientific definition for what it was. But yes. Gregory Bradley says Hines Ward may be a top 10 dog of all time. I could listen to that. I could listen to top 10. Now, there's a lot of contenders for the top 10, but I could listen to that for Ward. If there's a category for pound player, does the most, Ward may be a top on a list like that. But yeah, I could listen to top 10. Henry Dion shouting out Shadarius Tootle, looking forward to his future at Georgia. Obviously, Georgia working to hold on to Nick Abrams right now. Maybe a big push from Michigan. We've heard about that. Tootle's a guy they like a lot there too. Stick D says, who are some of your predecessors and contemporaries who've been an inspiration to your career? One of these days we may talk more about that. I'm always hesitant to say some of them because not everybody likes everybody. And so, you don't want to poison people's mind necessarily. But I've always been really, influenced by the biggest influence of all, probably a guy like Larry Munson, just because of his relationship with Georgia fans when I was growing up. But as far as this particular job goes, I've always been fascinated by the solo host, the host who does the solo style show. And so my influences are the solo style show host because that's always what I wanted to do. Not because I don't like other people, co-host, things like that. I just like the cadence of a solo style show. And so ultimately those are my real heroes, those who've done solo shows well. One of these days we may talk more about that. For now, though, I got to go. Hope you'll have a great day. Check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. Do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that. Also, get your AC tuned up, heating system, get ready for winter. It's going to be here before you know it. Go ahead and get ahead of that. Now, you'll still be last minute, but you know what I'm saying. Don't let cold weather show up and your heating system not work. Get it tuned up to factory fresh specs, or if you got a plumbing emergency, RS Andrews can take care of that for you too. And by the way, Go with the Flow, presented by RS Andrews. We're dropping that on Wednesdays now. I like saying dropping it. Makes it sound like I'm cool. We drop that on Wednesdays now, so you can check that out. DawgNation video channels, including our DawgNation YouTube page. And one more big one tomorrow. Getting you ready for Georgia and Auburn. Back tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then.